Kia ora, I'm Erin J. Doyle. Welcome to my channel. First of all, apologies for any background noise, there is a game on. And secondly, apologies / warning, this video might end up just being a terrifying stream of conscious with no real conclusion because I have not really prepared what I want to say. I've been intending to make a video on this topic for a while, but I haven't formulated a plan or really come up with a summarizing point. But I can't think of what else to talk about today, so here we are. That topic is writing from life. So I have done a course in creative non-fiction at university, and then from that written a number of poems or prose poems which have been published, which would fall into the realm of creative non-fiction. They are factual in their nature, but the way that they are presented is kind of highly embellished or in a poetic form, or amalgamates real people to create a fictional character within the piece, or leaves out key information for the purposes of privacy and protection, or just because it made it more interesting. And then I also have the Camino story, which is a not at all. It is a novel, which in its first draft was almost entirely true. Everything was real except the main character, who had not just a fictional name, but a fictional background. All her family were fictional. Her journey was fictional. Well, at least her internal journey was. Her physical journey was 100% true, and then I'm sure I've talked about before, over the various drafts I've reduced the truth down as much as possible. I've removed real people and populated the story with a fictional cast of characters, with the exception of 4 very specific people, all of whom I have sustained contact with since I completed the Camino, and I have spoken to each of them about the piece and shown them the chapters in which the character based on them appears and gotten their consent. But everyone else, completely fakety fake. In writing these pieces, I have had a couple of experiences which I think are probably near universal for most writers, particularly if you're writing creative non-fiction or something which just has a seed of truth but is otherwise fictional. And that is, people will assume you are writing about them whether you are or not. This was something that we talked about when I did creative non-fiction at university. We were told that people would read our work and read something which had nothing to do with them, they did not appear in it in any way, and believe that you've written about them, and then have feelings that you then had to deal with. And they were also just as likely to read something which was 100% about them and had a very real description of them or their actions, and have no idea that you'd written about them and be completely fine with it. Because people have a different impression of themselves than what your impression of them is. So they won't necessarily recognize themselves in your impression of them, but they might see themselves in something that has nothing to do with them for the same reason. And I've definitely experienced that. I have had someone say to me that they read my work, all of my work, specifically to see if I have written about them, which means that I never write about them, because if they're already on the hunt, I don't want to have to deal with the consequences of them finding something, because shit. I have also had someone say to me that they read my work to, and I quote, "try and find out what's wrong with you." Nice. Just lovely. Now, maybe I'm surrounded with a sea of conceited assholes, or maybe these are universal experiences, I don't know. these experiences have made me quite cautious when writing my Camino story, because I don't want to have to deal with that. But also, most of the people I met on the Camino, I don't know what their names were. Like, I couldn't tell you the names of the hundreds of people that I briefly met whilst walking across Spain. Of course I can't. Even if they told me, and many of them wouldn't have, because we would have just had a chit chat in which we didn't exchange names. Because you don't formally introduce yourself to everyone you meet when you're just walking down the road, which is what most of the Camino is. But I think there's also this thing where perhaps I met somebody and I did give them my name and they happen to remember my name, but I don't remember theirs, and we don't have sustained contact, so I wouldn't know that. And maybe they read the book in the future and they recognise something, whether it's real or not, and believe that I've written about them, and then have feelings, and I wouldn't know because I don't even know who that person is anymore. That's actually something that could happen, and that's quite scary. And I think it's completely unavoidable. That background noise is really distracting me. And because it's unavoidable, I'm having to just kind of do what my creative writing lecturer said, which is to just forge ahead anyway. I can't predict or prevent people from finding themselves in my work when they are not there. So I might as well just write what I have to write, and just for my own, comfort, know that I have gotten permission from the people that I really needed to get permission from, and everyone else is completely fictional or highly amalgamated or highly embellished, or is a fictional character who said one thing that a real person did in fact say to me, but everything else about them is fake. So none of that would be real enough to say that it was factual, or that a real person should identify themselves in it or feel that I have written about them specifically or describe them in such a way that others would recognise them from the text. But you know, humans are humans. Like, they find themselves in places that they aren't, because everyone's the main character of their own story. God, that noise is really annoying. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but obviously if I had written something that was in no way inspired by any element of truth and was completely fictional, completely fantasy, no way it could be real, you would imagine that I'd have fewer of these experiences, but there might still be people who read it to psychoanalyze me, or to see if I have written about them in a fantasy form. So maybe it's an unavoidable thing regardless of your genre. I do think that writing about completely fictional characters with no seed of truth in them is easier though. Like, with the 4 characters who are based on real people, I felt like I had to be respectful. A character is more interesting if they have something interesting about them, like they look weird, or they have some sort of hideous negative trait, whether it's visual or behavioural. Can't do that to a real person though, because that would hurt their feelings. So for the 4 characters which are based on real people, caution around not hurting their feelings when they read the book prevented me from fleshing out those characters, because I felt like I had to keep it very respectful to the real person, and I couldn't throw in any kind of like, oh my god, their makeup was hideous, or bad teeth, or you know, maybe they were very stupid or smelly. Like, I couldn't put anything like that. No, I'm saying that these people were, but like, I couldn't embellish a character in a negative way without having implied insult for a real person who could read the book. So that was something that I actually felt quite restricted by, and when I've been rereading it, I stumble across chapters where these 4 real-to-life characters are, or at least reasonably real-to-life characters are, and I feel like those are my flattest characters, because they should feel real, but they're sort of lightly described, and I feel like they don't say as much as they could, or there's just something about them that makes them feel lesser to me. And I think the fact that I've been cautious about writing respectfully is why. And if I wrote something that was completely fictional with no inspired by real people characters, I wouldn't have that problem. Or maybe it's just that it's not that I've written them respectfully, but I've tried to write them truthfully, and real people are quite boring compared to fictional characters I just made up or amalgamated from all the interesting parts of several different people. So maybe they just feel bland because they're too real. And I don't know which it is. I think it's the being respectful one, but maybe it's not. So I guess my summary is like, if you are writing something where you have the freedom to completely abandon truth and go full fiction, maybe do that. Because maybe the chances of people deciding that you've written about them is slightly less, and maybe your character descriptions will be liberated by fiction and therefore be better. Maybe. I don't know. Almost spilled. Oh, 40 years and I still can't use a cup properly. Well, on that note, I think I have run out of things to say. I'm sure I mentioned this video wasn't going to be very well put together. I don't really know what my point is even. But those are my thoughts at least. If you enjoyed this video, maybe consider giving it a like, leave a comment to let me know what you think on this issue, if you've had any interesting experiences you'd like to share. If you're new around here, maybe hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.